She was standing in our living room, screaming at my 7-year-old daughter, calling her a disgusting little criminal, and I could see the veins bulging in her neck as she pointed her bony finger directly at my child's face. My daughter was sobbing uncontrollably, her small body shaking with fear, and this woman, this neighbor we barely knew, was demanding that we pack our bags and leave the apartment complex immediately, because we were, according to her exact words, a family of thieves who didn't deserve to breathe the same air as decent people. What had my daughter supposedly done to deserve this brutal verbal assault? She had accidentally stepped on a flower in the community garden, a single flower, one daisy that was already wilting, and this woman had been waiting months for exactly this moment. I didn't know it then, but this Karen had been watching us through secret cameras she had illegally installed throughout the building, documenting our every move, waiting patiently like a predator for any tiny mistake she could exploit. What happened next would change everything we thought we knew about privacy, safety, and just how far a disturbed person will go to destroy innocent lives. This is the story of how we exposed a criminal stalker hiding behind the mask of a concerned citizen. I need to take you back to the beginning because you need to understand how calculated this entire operation was from day one. My name is Jennifer, and I moved into the Sunset Ridge apartment complex in Phoenix, Arizona in the spring of 2022 with my husband David and our 2 children, Emma, who was 7, and Tyler, who was 10. We were a completely normal family. David worked as an accountant for a small firm downtown. I worked from home as a freelance graphic designer. Our kids went to the local elementary school and played soccer on weekends. There was absolutely nothing remarkable about us, nothing that should have attracted the attention of a predator, but that's exactly what we got. Before we go any further, if you believe that people like Karen should face consequences for their actions, or if you think stalking and harassment should never be tolerated, I want you to subscribe to this channel right now, because we share stories every single day about entitled people getting exactly what they deserve. These stories will satisfy that part of you that craves justice, and they might even help you recognize the warning signs if you ever find yourself dealing with someone like the woman I'm about to describe. Hit that subscribe button, turn on notifications, and join our community of people who refuse to let bullies win. Now let me introduce you to the villain of this story. Her name was Patricia Hendricks, but everyone in the building called her Karen behind her back, and honestly, she earned that title through years of dedicated effort. Patricia was 63 years old, retired from a career in insurance claims adjustment, and she had lived in Unit 412 of our building for over 15 years. She was a thin woman with sharp features, grey hair that she always kept in a severe bun, and eyes that seemed to be constantly scanning, evaluating, and judging everything around her. The first time I saw her was on moving day. We were carrying boxes up the stairs because the elevator was out of service, and she was standing on the third-floor landing with her arms crossed, just watching us. Not offering to help, not saying hello, just watching with this expression of pure suspicion on her face. When I smiled and said hi, she responded by asking how many people would be living in our unit and whether we had any pets. Not a welcome to the building, not an introduction, just an interrogation. I should have recognized that moment for the red flag it was. Over the next few weeks, I started noticing Patricia everywhere. She was in the laundry room when I did laundry. She was in the parking garage when I left for errands. She was in the hallway when I took out the trash. At first, I thought it was coincidence, but then I started paying attention to the timing. She would appear within minutes of me leaving my apartment, and she would always find some reason to speak to me, usually to point out some rule I was apparently violating. Did I know that laundry machines were reserved for residents only, and I needed to show my key card to prove I lived there? Did I know that parking spots were assigned, and she had personally counted the number of times my husband parked in spot 47 instead of spot 48? Did I know that trash had to be sorted into recyclables and non-recyclables, and she had noticed our bags seemed suspiciously heavy? These interactions were annoying, but I tried to brush them off. Some people are just lonely and need something to occupy their time, I told myself. I had no idea that her behavior was about to escalate dramatically. The first real incident happened about 2 months after we moved in. It was a Saturday morning, and Tyler and Emma were playing in the courtyard area behind the building. There was a small playground there with a slide and some swings, and a grassy area where kids could run around. Other families used it regularly, and there had never been any complaints. The kids were throwing a frisbee back and forth when Patricia came marching out of the building like a general leading troops into battle. She walked directly onto the grass, positioned herself between my children, and started shouting at them that the courtyard was not a playground and that running and throwing objects was strictly prohibited under Section 12, subsection 4 of the community guidelines. Tyler, who was 10 and very well behaved, politely told her that they were just playing and they would be quiet. Patricia's response was to grab the frisbee out of his hand and tell him that she was confiscating it as evidence for her formal complaint to building management. My son came upstairs crying, and I immediately went down to confront her. When I asked for the frisbee back, she refused and told me that I would receive official notification of the violation within 72 hours. I was so shocked by her behavior that I just stood there speechless. David had to go down later and essentially demand the frisbee back, and even then she acted like she was doing us some enormous favor. That night, I found a 5-page typed letter slipped under our door detailing every noise complaint she claimed she had documented against our unit since we moved in. There were 37 separate entries, including things like loud footsteps at 7:30 in the morning, which was when the kids got ready for school, and suspicious drilling sounds, which was when David had hung a single picture frame. I didn't know it yet, but this was only the beginning. The harassment continued and intensified over the following months. Every week brought new complaints, new accusations, new letters under our door. Patricia complained that our cooking smells were infiltrating the hallway and causing her respiratory distress. She complained that our guests were parking in visitor spots for more than the allotted 2 hours. She complained that we were using too much electricity and affecting the building's grid. She complained that our children were making eye contact with her in the elevator in a threatening manner. Yes, she actually wrote that my 7-year-old daughter had threatened her by looking at her. Every complaint was documented in excruciating detail, dated and timed, and filed with building management. The property manager, a woman named Brenda, called us in for 3 separate meetings to discuss the complaints. Each time, she acknowledged that Patricia was a known problem tenant who had filed hundreds of complaints against various residents over the years, and each time she said there was nothing she could really do because Patricia technically had the right to report concerns. We felt completely helpless. What we didn't know was that Patricia's obsession with us had crossed into genuinely criminal territory. She had become convinced that we were the worst tenants in the history of the building, and she had decided that she needed evidence to prove it. So she took matters into her own hands in the most invasive way possible. She installed hidden cameras, not in her own apartment, but in the common areas of the building where she knew we would pass through. She put a tiny camera disguised as a smoke detector in the hallway near the elevators. She put another one in the laundry room ceiling tile. She put one near the mailboxes in the lobby. She even managed to access the maintenance closet next to our unit and install a camera that could see our front door and part of our living room through a small hole she drilled in the wall. This woman had created a surveillance network specifically designed to monitor my family. She watched the footage every single day, sometimes for hours at a time, looking for anything she could use against us. She documented the times we came and went. She noted what we were wearing. She recorded conversations we had in the hallway with other neighbors. She was building a file on us like we were criminals under investigation. And the worst part, she was patient. She knew that eventually we would make a mistake, even a tiny one, and she would be there to capture it and blow it completely out of proportion. The mistake she had been waiting for came on a warm afternoon in September. Emma had been at a friend's birthday party, and David was bringing her home. They walked through the courtyard, and Emma was skipping ahead happily, still excited from the party. There was a small community garden along the path, a little patch of flowers that residents could plant and tend. Emma accidentally stepped off the path and onto the edge of the garden, and her foot landed on a daisy. One single daisy. She immediately said oops and stepped back onto the path, and David didn't even notice because it was such a minor thing. But Patricia noticed. She was watching through the camera she had hidden near the courtyard entrance, and she saw the whole thing. She immediately saved the footage, and I imagine she must have felt like Christmas had come early. She had her evidence. She had caught us in the act of destroying community property. It didn't matter that it was an accident. It didn't matter that it was a 7-year-old child. It didn't matter that the flower was barely damaged. Patricia had been waiting for this moment for months, and she was going to make the most of it. The next morning was when everything exploded. I was in the kitchen making breakfast when there was a pounding on our door. Not a knock, a pounding. David answered it, and Patricia pushed past him into our apartment before he could even say anything. I came running out of the kitchen to see this woman standing in our living room, her face red with rage, her body literally shaking with anger. She started screaming immediately. She called us vandals and criminals and accused us of systematically destroying the community garden as part of some kind of vendetta against her personally. David tried to calm her down, tried to ask what she was talking about, but she was beyond reason. Then Emma came out of her bedroom, still in her pajamas, confused by the commotion. When Patricia saw her, she turned all her rage onto my little girl. She pointed her finger at Emma and started berating her, calling her a destructive little monster, saying she had evidence that Emma had deliberately trampled the garden, saying that children like her were the reason society was falling apart. My daughter burst into tears. She had no idea what she had done wrong. She couldn't even remember stepping on the flower because it had been such an insignificant moment. But Patricia was treating it like she had burned down the building. I stepped between them and told Patricia to get out of my home immediately. She responded by saying that she had video evidence of our crimes and that she would be presenting it to building management, to the homeowners association, and to the police if necessary. Then she looked at my crying daughter one more time and said, and I will never forget these exact words, "This is what happens when trash moves into a nice building. You will be evicted by the end of the month." After she left, my entire family was in shock. David was furious in a way I had never seen before. Tyler was asking what had just happened and why that lady was so mean. Emma was sobbing and asking if she was going to jail. I held my daughter and tried to calm her down while also trying to process what had just occurred. A grown woman had just forced her way into my home and verbally abused my 7-year-old over a flower. A single flower that wasn't even killed by being stepped on. This was insanity, but we had no idea how much worse things were about to get. Within 48 hours, Patricia had launched a full-scale campaign against our family. She had called an emergency meeting of the building residents to discuss what she called the ongoing vandalism crisis. She had printed flyers with photos, which we later realized must have come from her hidden cameras, showing my daughter near the garden with text calling her a repeat offender. She had filed formal complaints with building management demanding our immediate eviction. She had posted on the community social media page, naming our family and accusing us of everything from property destruction to noise violations to child endangerment, which she claimed because she said our kids were allowed to run unsupervised. She had even called Child Protective Services to report that we were negligent parents who allowed our children to commit crimes. The CPS visit was terrifying. 2 case workers showed up at our door on a Tuesday afternoon, and even though they quickly determined that there was no evidence of neglect and closed the case immediately, the trauma of having my parenting questioned because of a crazy neighbor was something I can never forget. The building meeting was even worse. Patricia had organized it for a Wednesday evening in the community room, and about 30 residents showed up. We debated whether to attend, but David felt strongly that we needed to defend ourselves. We walked in and immediately felt the eyes of our neighbors on us. Some looked sympathetic, some looked curious, and a few, clearly Patricia's allies, looked hostile. Patricia had set up a presentation with a laptop and projector, and she stood at the front of the room like she was giving a corporate keynote rather than persecuting a family over a flower. She spent 45 minutes detailing every alleged violation we had committed since moving in. She had charts. She had timelines. She had photographs that could only have been taken with hidden surveillance equipment, though we didn't realize that yet. She showed the video of Emma stepping on the flower in slow motion, replaying it 3 times while giving commentary about willful destruction of community property. She estimated the damage at $200, claiming the flower was a rare variety, which it absolutely was not. It was a daisy from a home improvement store that cost about $3. She demanded that we be fined, evicted, and permanently banned from the property. When she finally finished, David stood up to respond. He was calm and measured, even though I know he was burning with anger inside. He explained that our daughter had accidentally stepped on a flower while walking through the courtyard, that it was completely unintentional, and that we would be happy to replace the flower or pay for any actual damages. He pointed out that many of the photographs Patricia had shown were taken without our knowledge or consent, and asked how she had obtained them. Patricia snapped back that she had the right to document criminal behavior and that we should be grateful she hadn't already called the police. A neighbor named Michael, who lived on our floor and had always been friendly to us, raised his hand and asked Patricia how she could possibly have video footage of the inside of the courtyard when there were no security cameras in that area. Patricia hesitated for just a moment, then said she had invested in her own security equipment to protect the building since management was clearly failing to do so. That answer seemed to satisfy some people, but others, including Michael, looked uncomfortable. The meeting ended without any formal resolution, but the damage to our reputation was done. Several neighbors who had previously been friendly now avoided eye contact with us in the hallways. We had become the pariahs of Sunset Ridge. Over the following weeks, the situation continued to deteriorate. Patricia seemed energized by her success at the meeting and doubled down on her harassment. She filed complaint after complaint with building management, claiming that we were retaliating against her by playing loud music, which we never did, and by having our children knock on her door and run away, which was completely fabricated. She stopped us in the hallways to lecture us about respect and responsibility. She told other residents false stories about our behavior, including a completely made-up incident where she claimed David had threatened her with physical violence. We started keeping a log of every interaction, every complaint, every instance of harassment. We consulted with a lawyer who told us that we might have grounds for a restraining order, but that it would be a long process and might make our living situation even more difficult. We felt trapped. We couldn't afford to break our lease and move. We couldn't get management to take real action against Patricia. We were stuck living in constant fear of what this woman would do next. The breakthrough came in early November, about 2 months after the flower incident. Tyler had come home from school complaining that the Wi-Fi in his room was acting strange. He was 10 years old, but already interested in technology, and he had been trying to connect a new gaming device to our network. He noticed that there was an unfamiliar device connected to the building's shared Wi-Fi network, something labeled with a random string of numbers and letters. Out of curiosity, he told David about it, and David, who had some IT experience from his work, decided to investigate. What he found made his blood run cold. The device was a wireless camera, and when he traced the signal, it was coming from somewhere very close to our apartment. David spent that entire weekend investigating. He borrowed a radio frequency detector from a friend who worked in security, and he methodically swept our apartment and the surrounding areas. He found the first camera in the hallway outside our door, hidden in what looked like an ordinary smoke detector. He found the second one in the ceiling tile, directly above the laundry machines. He found the third one near the mailboxes in the lobby. And then he found the fourth one, the most invasive of all, hidden in the maintenance closet next to our apartment, positioned to look through a small hole that had been drilled through the wall. This camera had a direct view into our living room. Someone had been watching us inside our own home. David called me over and showed me what he had found. I burst into tears. The violation was so complete, so intimate. This person, whoever it was, had seen us eating dinner, helping the kids with homework, watching television, having private conversations. They had seen me in my pajamas, seen me crying on hard days, seen every vulnerable moment we had experienced in what we thought was the privacy of our own home. We immediately called the police. 2 officers arrived within an hour, and David showed them everything he had found. They were visibly shocked by the extent of the surveillance system. One of the officers said he had been on the force for 15 years and had never seen anything quite like this in a residential building. They took photographs of each camera location, collected the devices as evidence, and asked us who we thought might be responsible. We told them about Patricia. We told them about the months of harassment, the flower incident, the photographs at the meeting that could only have been taken with hidden cameras. The officers took detailed notes and said they would be investigating. The investigation moved faster than we expected. The cameras were connected to a local network, and the police were able to trace the data storage to a computer in Patricia's apartment. They obtained a search warrant the following day, and what they found was beyond anything we could have imagined. Patricia had been running a full surveillance operation from her apartment. She had a dedicated room with multiple monitors, external hard drives containing terabytes of video footage, and printed logs documenting the activities of not just our family, but 7 other families in the building. She had been watching all of us for years. The hard drives contained footage going back over 3 years, with folders organized by apartment number and resident name. Our folder alone contained over 400 hours of video. She had timestamps and notes detailing things like when we woke up, when we went to sleep, what we ate, what we wore, who visited us, what packages we received, and countless other intimate details of our daily lives. She had even recorded audio in some cases, capturing private conversations we had in the hallway outside our door. The police also found her complaint files, which were even more extensive than what she had shared publicly. She had drafted dozens of complaint letters that she had never sent, including ones accusing us of drug dealing, prostitution, and running an illegal daycare. She had made notes about our children's school schedules, their friends' names, and their extracurricular activities. She had photographs of our children that she had taken through her hidden cameras without our knowledge or consent. It was stalking on a level that the investigating detective later described as one of the most obsessive cases he had ever encountered. Patricia was arrested at her apartment on a Thursday morning. I wasn't there to see it, but a neighbor told us later that she had screamed the entire time, insisting that she was the victim and that we had somehow set her up. She was charged with multiple felonies including illegal surveillance, stalking, invasion of privacy, harassment, and possession of recording devices in a prohibited manner. The charges applied to all 8 families she had been monitoring, but our family was the primary focus of the investigation because her surveillance of us was the most extensive and because her harassment of us had been the most overt. She was held on $50,000 bail, which she posted within a week. While awaiting trial, she was ordered to stay at least 500 feet from our building and to have no contact with any of the victims. She violated this order twice in the first month, once by sending a letter to building management accusing us of framing her, and once by having a friend attempt to deliver a message to us. Each violation resulted in additional charges. The trial took place the following spring. It lasted 2 weeks, and the evidence against Patricia was overwhelming. The prosecution presented the cameras, the hard drives, the footage, the logs, the complaint files, everything. They called expert witnesses who testified about the sophistication of her surveillance system and the intentionality required to set it up. They called victims from all 8 affected families, and one by one, we told our stories of harassment, invasion, and fear. I testified for almost 2 hours. I described every incident from the first day we moved in, every complaint, every confrontation, every sleepless night wondering what this woman would do next. I described how my daughter had required counseling after being screamed at in our own living room. I described how my son had become anxious about leaving the apartment, constantly looking over his shoulder for cameras. I described how my husband and I had fought about whether to move, about whether to fight back, about whether any of this was somehow our fault. The jury listened in silence, and more than one juror looked visibly disturbed by what they heard. Patricia's defense attorney attempted to argue that she was simply a concerned citizen trying to maintain building standards in the face of negligent management. He argued that the cameras were a security measure, that the footage was never shared publicly, and that her actions, while perhaps excessive, came from a place of genuine concern for the community. The argument fell completely flat. The prosecutor, in her rebuttal, pointed out that concerned citizens do not drill holes in walls to spy on children. Concerned citizens do not maintain detailed files on the sleeping schedules of their neighbors. Concerned citizens do not call child protective services based on fabricated accusations. What Patricia had done was not community involvement. It was criminal obsession. The jury deliberated for less than 4 hours before returning guilty verdicts on all counts. Patricia showed no emotion as the verdicts were read, staring straight ahead with the same cold expression I had seen so many times in our hallways. Sentencing came 6 weeks later. The judge, an older woman who had clearly been affected by the testimony at trial, gave a statement before announcing the sentence. She said that in her 30 years on the bench, she had seen many cases of harassment and stalking, but that the methodical, sustained, and invasive nature of Patricia's conduct was exceptional. She said that the damage done to the victims went beyond what could be measured in terms of property or even psychology. It was an assault on the fundamental right of every person to feel safe in their own home. She sentenced Patricia to 8 years in state prison, with the possibility of parole after 5 years. She also issued permanent restraining orders on behalf of all 8 victim families, ordered Patricia to pay restitution for counseling costs, and prohibited her from owning or operating any recording or surveillance equipment for the rest of her life. Patricia was taken into custody immediately. As she was led out of the courtroom in handcuffs, she turned and looked directly at me. Her expression was pure hatred. Even after everything that had happened, after all the evidence, after the verdict, she still believed she was the victim and we were the villains. Some people are just broken in ways that cannot be fixed. The aftermath of the trial brought both relief and unexpected challenges. On one hand, we finally felt safe. We could walk through our building without fear of being watched, without waiting for the next confrontation, without dreading the next complaint under our door. The other victim families reached out to us, and we formed an unexpected support network. We shared our experiences, compared notes on Patricia's tactics, and helped each other process the trauma of what we had endured. On the other hand, we had to deal with the lingering effects of everything that had happened. Emma continued to see a therapist for almost a year after the trial. She had developed anxiety around adult strangers and was afraid to be alone in public spaces. Tyler became protective of his sister to an almost excessive degree, constantly checking on her, worrying about her safety. David and I went through a difficult period in our marriage as we both processed our feelings of violation and failure. We had failed to protect our family from this predator. We had lived under surveillance for months without knowing it. We had let this woman scream at our daughter in our own home. Even though intellectually we knew it wasn't our fault, emotionally the guilt was overwhelming. The legal victory also led to some positive changes. Building management, faced with the liability of having allowed a stalker to operate freely for years, agreed to a significant settlement with all 8 victim families. We used the money to pay off some debt, to fund the kids' therapy, and to put away savings for their education. The building also implemented new security protocols, including regular inspections of common areas for unauthorized devices, better screening of resident complaints to identify patterns of harassment, and a clear process for escalating concerns about threatening behavior. The property management company fired several employees who had dismissed warnings about Patricia over the years and brought in new leadership committed to taking residents' safety seriously. We even learned that our story had been used as a training case for other property management companies in the region. Our suffering had at least led to better protection for other families. A year after the trial, we moved out of Sunset Ridge, not because we had to, but because we wanted a fresh start. We found a small house in a quiet neighborhood about 20 minutes away. It had a backyard for the kids, a 2-car garage, and no shared walls with anyone. The first night in our new home, I walked through every room, looking at the ceilings, the walls, the smoke detectors. Old habits die hard, but slowly, over time, we began to feel safe again. Emma started at a new school where no one knew about what had happened. Tyler joined the school robotics club and found a healthy outlet for his interest in technology. David and I started date nights again, something we had completely abandoned during the worst of the harassment. We even got a dog, a friendly golden retriever named Biscuit, who greeted everyone with tail wags and enthusiastic licking. The contrast between Biscuit's unconditional love and Patricia's unconditional hatred was not lost on us. I sometimes think about what drove Patricia to become the person she was. I've read about her background, about her isolated childhood, her failed marriage, her lack of children or close relationships. I've learned that she had been fired from her job in insurance after being caught falsifying claims against people she had personal grudges with. I've heard from long-time building residents that she had always been difficult, but that her behavior escalated dramatically after her mother died about 5 years before we moved in. None of this excuses what she did, but it helps me understand that her hatred was never really about us. We were just convenient targets, a family that was easy to watch, easy to antagonize, easy to project all her bitterness and resentment onto. In a strange way, I almost pity her. Almost. Then I remember my daughter's face as this woman screamed at her, and the pity evaporates pretty quickly. Patricia became eligible for parole 2 years ago. We received notification from the Victim Advocacy Program and were given the opportunity to submit statements opposing her release. All 8 victim families submitted statements, and the parole board denied her request. She will be eligible again next year, and we will be there again to ensure she serves her full sentence. Some of the other victims have forgiven her, at least in the sense of letting go of their anger for their own peace of mind. I'm not there yet. I may never be. What she did to my family, to my children, was unforgivable. Forgiveness is not something she has earned and not something I owe her. I'm sharing this story because I want other people to know that surveillance harassment is real, that it can happen in ordinary places to ordinary families, and that you have the right to fight back. If you notice a neighbor who seems to know too much about your activities, who appears whenever you leave your home, who has photographs or information they shouldn't have access to, trust your instincts. Document everything. Report your concerns to police, even if you think they might not take you seriously. Get a radio frequency detector and sweep your home for hidden devices. Check your Wi-Fi network for unfamiliar connections. Look for small holes in walls, unusual smoke detectors, anything that seems out of place. Your privacy is your right, and no one, not a neighbor, not a landlord, not anyone, has the right to violate it. Our family is doing well now. Emma just turned 11 and is thriving. She still goes to therapy occasionally, but mostly as a check-in rather than a necessity. Tyler is 13 and completely obsessed with computer programming, which we've decided to see as a positive rather than a concern. David and I are stronger than ever, having survived a crisis that could have torn us apart. We've learned to appreciate our quiet, boring life in ways we never did before. We've learned that privacy is precious and fragile. We've learned that evil can wear the face of an ordinary neighbor. And we've learned that standing up for yourself, even when it's terrifying, even when it seems hopeless, is always the right choice. To Patricia Hendricks, if you're somehow hearing this from your prison cell, I want you to know that you failed. You want to destroy our family, and instead you destroyed only yourself. You want to drive us out of our home, and instead you're the one who will never be welcome anywhere again. You want to prove that we were criminals, and instead you proved only that you were a stalker and a predator. Every day that you spend behind bars is a day that my family spends in freedom and happiness. You lose, we win, and that's exactly how this story should end. If you made it to the end of this story, thank you for listening. If this resonated with you, if you've ever dealt with a neighbor from hell or a stalker or someone who just wouldn't leave you alone, I want to hear from you. Drop a comment below sharing your experience. You might find that you're not alone, that others have faced similar challenges, and that there is hope even in the darkest situations. And if you haven't already, please subscribe to this channel. We share stories like this every day, stories of entitled people getting their comeuppance, stories of victims finding justice, stories that remind us all that karma is real and bullies eventually pay the price for their actions. Hit that subscribe button, ring the notification bell, and join our community. Together, we can create a world where Karens think twice before targeting innocent people, where stalkers know they will be caught and punished, and where every family has the right to live in peace without fear of being watched by hateful eyes. Thank you for being here. Take care of yourselves and each other. And remember, no matter what you're going through, better days are ahead.